Hello and welcome to Gupshup. We're your hosts. I'm Alex,
And I'm Zuhair.
and in this podcast, we talk about my journey as a former Catholic into marrying a Muslim man. We cover topics such as relationships, family, and culture as we discuss the joys and challenges of being in a mixed race relationship. In our last episode, we spoke about the Nikkah, and we left off at the point where we moved in to your parents' house or our portion.
There's a long move in.
Yeah,
We kind of just
a whole 20 steps.
walked from the living room to our living room.
Yeah.
So basically, to kind of give you a visual of how it looks, we have a big door in between that separates the two portions, and then we have a standalone portion here with our own kitchen and 2 bedrooms, living room, and then it's kind of just separated with a door in between. So when we moved in, we just walked across, closed the door, and that was like our move in.
Yeah. And I had brought some of my things so that I could, stay overnight. We had set up most of it. The living area was set up. We had a couch and everything. We'd moved our bed in, and our office was set up as well, so we can both work from home.
That was a fun trip. When we moved all that stuff, we hired a truck.
We tried to save some money.
Yeah, well, we were trying to save money, and that we hired our own truck, even though neither of us has driven a truck or has any experience driving a car bigger than the Prius. So that was interesting for us. And, I think ultimately it definitely isn't worth it to try and save money and move stuff yourself. There is definitely a skill and experience that comes into it, and which we don't have.
Or just bring a lot more rope to secure stuff.
Yeah.
We had like 2
There was an
bits of rope,
afterthought.
and we just ran out of it very quickly.
Yeah.
So
yeah, have the rope, have a trolley, a proper one. But if you can afford it, just hire a removalist. That's the best way to do it. But yeah, we hired a truck, and we ended up, moving the fridge and the desk and the bed ourselves, and it was just us 2 and my brother. And we have like next to no experience in securing goods in a truck and like making sure it doesn't tip over and stuff. So it was really only like 5 or 4 big items, and it took us the best part of the whole day. And it was very stressful and very difficult.
actually, it was kind of fun because it was one of those trucks that had a hydraulic lift. So we were like taking turns going up and like standing on the thing that lifts and then going up and down.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess that was fun. But
yeah, once in a lifetime kind of thing. Next time we'll just hire a removalist.
Yeah, not worth it.
No.
But yeah, we had everything set up before the Nikkah, and then after that we kind of just moved in, and that was a different experience. Like that was the first time, that we were able to move in together, and it was like legal, and it was interesting. It was all official, and then we were kind of like, okay, well now what kind of thing, because we could do anything we wanted, and what we actually did was sleep the first night.
Yeah, it was very anticlimactic.
We were very tired.
Yeah, it's a long day.
Yeah, so I mean, more broadly speaking, what we want to cover in this episode is moving in with in-laws and what that's been like for you from your perspective. Because obviously I've lived here my whole life, and it wasn't that different for me. But this was something that we discussed quite a bit before it happened, obviously.
Well, originally, we used to speak about it, but I always thought you were joking when you said, we were going to live with your family.
Yeah. Well, maybe I was.
You weren't.
I might have been to an extent, because I knew it was an option, but I didn't really ever think seriously like this is what we're going to do. Ultimately what happened was, we were as we were closer to the Nikkah, we were kind of discussing like what's going to happen after, and financially and logically, it kind of made more sense for us to not try and either rent or buy a house at that point, because we weren't ready. And I knew that like it wasn't, especially for you, it definitely wasn't the ideal solution to live with in-laws. I think there's definitely, for the most part, no one wants to live with in-laws.
Mhm.
It's just not a desirable thing. But yeah, I guess you can explain what it's been like for you and your experiences, or maybe just start with like when we first started discussing it. Obviously, you weren't open to the idea, and you didn't want to do it. So why was that?
Well, I think that was mainly like influenced by my mum's thoughts about it, because she kind of, it's a little bit frowned upon, I guess, to have to rely on in-laws or your parents, because she always talks about, being an independent woman and, not having to rely on others. So that played in my mind as a reason not to do that. But at the same time, I thought it is, practically speaking, it's quite a smart idea to be able to save money in that way. But yeah, I wasn't really a fan of the idea when you first pitched it to me.
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of those things that you kind of feel like you're taking a backward step if you do it.
Yeah.
And especially, the added the added thing of like the religious and cultural differences.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I think you're probably like, oh, how's it actually going to work?
Yeah, because I guess it's not like, it's something I had to get used to, because it's not an environment that I would be comfortable in. Obviously, like that's not my home. It's not the same as like living with your parents, because like I can just be myself, I guess, at my
Yeah.
house. But I would have to sort of censor myself in a way here, or at least, dress differently, and like I can't just wear whatever I want. And also just be, more respectful of the people around you, more so than I could be towards you, like if it was just us two.
Yeah. It's
And
like,
also, yeah.
you're living with, I mean, my family's not that big. It's just my parents and my brother. But you're living in a household that constantly kind of has people in, because my sister's family come over and her kids are here once a week. And there's definitely more happening. There's more people around than there would be if we were just living by ourselves. So starting out like from when we discussed it, and you kind of weren't open to it, to the point where you were open to it, like what changed in your mind to to say, okay, let's do it?
I guess that was after I had met your family and I could see how it could work.
Like you knew kind of what you were dealing with.
Yeah. Well, I had an idea of what they're like. And I guess there is some privacy, because, there's a door in between us. So it's not as bad as I imagined it to be at first, as in, no privacy and just being kind of awkward and feeling like we can't really be ourselves.
Yeah. I think in what we've found in terms of privacy is that you kind of need to set your own boundaries and what you're comfortable with. It's been, the more we've kind of lived here, the more we've been more comfortable with kind of just living more openly, I guess, and kind of just going in that section, like my parents' section, more often. And like when my sister's kids come over and stuff, like it's pretty open. Like we're kind of in and out. So over time, it definitely has gotten easier and more sort of, I guess, as you've built rapport with my parents and my family, it would have progressively gotten easier to interact with them and be more comfortable just kind of walking around the house and not feeling like an outsider.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, like in terms of like privacy and stuff, it's kind of just been more left to us, how much we want to engage.
Yeah,
And yeah,
pretty much. So we're free to like open and close the door, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah. So that's been good. I think for us, when we're discussing to live with in-laws, um, what did you think were kind of like the main considerations that we took into account uh, when we're deciding whether we were going to rent? Like we had the option to rent for sure. We figured out that buying probably wasn't feasible at the time, and we would have been stretching ourselves too thin to try and do that.
Mm-hmm.
But renting for sure was an option, and that's always a viable option when you first get married, and that's kind of how most people think.
Yeah.
Um, but for us, like, what do we consider?
We considered, well, our future in terms of wanting to buy a property in the next few years and being able to save up enough money to do that and also, you know, increase our income, work on our businesses, our business
Businesses.
too. Well, businesses, yeah.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, just take steps towards our future. Because I think we would have been setting ourselves back a bit if we had rented at the time. I think that was the right thing to do. And I guess it was a bit, it took a bit of getting used to in the beginning.
Yeah. I think for me, the main consideration was the issue of paying. If we did rent, we'd be paying rent towards a property that we lived in, but our ultimate goal was always to buy a house and to own a house. And when you start renting, it becomes more difficult. It's not impossible, but it becomes more difficult to get to that stage where you can afford rent and be able to apply for a loan and get approved based on you having those rental expenses.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I was weighing up, as well as just, lifestyle. We being new to marriage, obviously, like it's both of our first marriage. We didn't really know like what kind of challenges we'd face, and we felt like it'd be easier if we had support from my family, especially when it came to having kids and us being new parents.
Mm-hmm.
Having that support network very close to us would be really useful.
Yeah.
And it's going to be something that we can rely on when we need to. So that's definitely something that we took into account. But the overarching reason really was financial, and as it always is, like it wasn't like we were like, yeah, let's live with my parents, and that's like our desire. Like it was an option, but it wasn't like our preferred option, obviously. But it's worked out well. Like it's been going really well so far. It's been about 6 months now, and yeah, how's that been for you?
Yeah, it's been good. I think in the beginning it was a bit scary for me.
Scary.
Yeah. Just like, I guess the unknown.
But what were you like worried about and scared about?
I was scared about, um, I guess just making a bad impression as like a housemate,
Yeah.
like not being helpful enough or, um, I guess like if I think about when I live at home, I'm quite annoying to be around probably. Like I'm either too loud or too quiet, like with my parents. And so here I think I'm just too quiet, but I don't know.
What do you mean too loud? Like you talk too loud or?
Like I'm pretty annoying, like, But like my parents are used to it because they're my parents. Like I can just say whatever. But here I obviously feel like I can't show that side of myself, that annoying side. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think
I don't
that's,
think you do that. I don't think you get annoying with your family.
I get in, like, I don't get annoying.
Yeah. You're just like always the same. You don't have like a more goofy side. You know what I mean?
Well, I definitely can't like turn it on and off. Like for me, it's just always, I am how I am, like,
Yeah,
kind of thing.
pretty much. But
So
also your parents are like used to you. They know you. But like for me, they wouldn't really know what I'm like.
yeah. Well, I think it's also something for them to get used to
Yeah.
because well, this isn't something we touched on, but they would have preferred for us to stay here. Like that's kind of traditional for us from a Pakistani perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's very normal and accepted for the sons' families to live with their parents.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely not the norm or as accepted in the Western society. So that's kind of where you were coming at it from, was like, it's not really normal to do that.
Yeah. Well, I was coming from more um, from the perspective that we would be like a burden to them, which I wouldn't want to be. Like I don't want us to be.
I think that's the difference in viewpoints. Like for my parents, they see it as a sign of honor or like as a sign of family. Like they like living in big families, and that's like genuinely that's what they like, was
Mm-hmm.
to have their sons' families live with them. Because you know how my dad's always talking about like building upwards and like building a whole new section in the house.
Mm-hmm.
That's like they don't see it as a burden at all, or maybe they do and they just don't tell us. But like the concept of like families living together is very normal to them, and that's why they were always like suggesting that option to me. It was like they didn't enforce it, but they were like, if you want to, you can.
Yep.
And I think they were very happy that we did that, and they were probably like worried, like how's it going to go, and like how they were kind of like telling us when we first started moving, like living here, was like, well, you can just lock your door and you know, I'm going to have guests, or when my sister's kids come over, like we don't have to interact with them if we don't want to.
Yeah. Well, that was another thing because we have our own access around the side of the house. So
Oh yeah,
I think we originally thought we would just use that door. But then what's ended up happening is we just go out through your parents' section if we
yeah.
want to leave the
Well,
house.
that's the main door. Like the side access we have is more for the backyard. But yeah, if we wanted to, we could use our side access and not have to go through the house. It's just more effort, I guess. And for us, we just found it a lot easier just to be able to walk through the front door in and out. And
Yeah. But I think when I told my mum that we had, like, we would just walk through the house, she was more like, aren't you bothering like your husband's family?
yeah, I think it's very difficult to see, like, to if you haven't lived it, you don't know what it's like, then it's very hard for people from the outside perspective to see. Like obviously, if you tell someone I live with my in-laws and I walk through their house to get in and out, it sounds like you're being a burden, it sounds like you're being annoying. um but when you come at it from, like, if you look at it from the internal perspective of like my family and how we all kind of are, like that's very normal. um Prior to us living here, my sister's family lived here, and that was also the case. They were just walking in and out of the front door, and that was like normal for us. So like for me especially, like I didn't think that was abnormal for us to be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, from your mum's perspective, or even from your perspective, it could be something that's like, well, they're walking through their house to do it. Um, but yeah, it's interesting to see the different, um, I guess, ways of life, of like what's accepted and what isn't.
Yeah. And on the topic of being a burden, um, another thing is in terms of food, like cooking, we eat a lot of your family's food or your mum's cooking pretty much all the time. So that's another thing that we need to work on.
Yeah, I think it's just,
I think we're relying a bit too much.
it's a bit of complacency for sure. Like when you have such a big support in terms of food, like we haven't felt obliged to make sure that we have food for lunch and dinner every day. Like it's a huge deal because that's like something that when you first move in as a couple, um, it's a big hassle and it's a big sort of learning curve. Is like, okay, we have to plan meals, we have to like know what we're going to make for lunch and dinner,
Mm.
and if you don't have anything to eat. So either you have to order in,
You'd order in,
yeah,
spend a lot of money.
yeah, and for us, it's been like really, really helpful to have food, like almost, I would say every second day. We don't have to cook. We just have food at home, which obviously isn't something we should rely on, but that's just kind of, I guess, another thing, part of the sort of lifestyle that we have. Um, but that's actually against tradition. Like for us to be eating food from my mum that she cooks, the tradition actually is that the the wife comes in and cooks for the in-laws, and that's more of what the tradition is like the wife would cook and clean and do stuff around the house. And
Okay, well, I would do that if I knew how to cook,
I'm not saying
but
you should, like that's, I'm talking about like the actual, I think it's a bit dated, or for sure it's dated, like for the daughter-in-law to come in and do all that stuff. But yeah, that for centuries, that is what it's been. Is the daughter-in-law is kind of expected, and almost like for the in-laws, it's almost like a like their
relief.
right.
Like what?
It's like their rights kind of thing, like
What?
to ask the daughter-in-law to do stuff for them. Obviously,
Oh.
my family isn't like that, but traditionally, that is usually how it works.
Well, now I feel even worse that we're constantly eating your family's food.
Mm, but I mean,
But
that's
yeah,
something that you kind of learn and grow as you go. Um, and that's something that obviously is going to be something we need to focus on and improve, is having our own food. Um,
and it's something that we are trying to implement by
yeah,
cooking 2 days a week, each of us.
yeah. Well,
Hopefully, soon we'll get to that point where we can cook most of our meals ourselves.
mhm, yeah. Well, that's one of the habits that we're trying to build, is that would cover 4 days a week of cooking.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, if we can do that, then we can stop relying on my mum as much for food. But yeah, it's just been like a huge support because we both work full time and don't always have the time to make food, and even we don't really remember to make food. Like it's kind of like when we're hungry, we're like, oh crap, now what do we eat?
Yeah. And there's nothing that's like readily available.
Yeah,
It always takes time to defrost things and prepare meals. And yeah, it's very time consuming.
yeah. So I think it's fair to say that all in all, like the experience from your perspective, like I can't speak for myself. I can only speak for myself. Is positive. Like your experience has been positive.
Yeah. And I think that, I think that that sort of rapport will grow with time as well, in terms of like how I was saying that I can't really be as much of myself as I can be with my parents. I think in over time they will become like I feel like they are like my parents, but in the sense of me being able to like, ask them for advice or help when I need it, like I can with my parents.
Mm. Yeah, I think that'll be good. That's definitely something you would work towards. And that rapport doesn't come naturally or quickly. It just takes time to build it. But in saying that, living with in-laws, you're going to build it a lot quicker than you would if you weren't.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
that's a side benefit.
Yeah.
Um, but let's talk a bit about our future goals. Like, we're obviously living with my parents right now, but we definitely have ambitions of owning our own house, preferably building our own house. That's kind of our ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Um, so that's what we're working towards. Is like we're trying to save. We're trying to you know, conserve as much as we can, and just
Grow our incomes.
grow incomes and work towards more, financial stability and strength, so that we can achieve our ultimate goal of buying, and buying in a nicer area, buying in sort of the sort of communities that we want to live in, because both of us have grown up in the western suburbs of Sydney our whole lives, um, and it's been fine for the most part. But I think if we want to, move past where we were and where we have been, um, it does take a lot of effort and does take a bit of a different approach to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we're working towards.
Well, the areas where we want to live are very expensive to live in, especially for people our age. I think most people our age would be renting or looking to buy an apartment or not a house, but we definitely want a house. That's what we're
just not apartment
working towards.
creatures.
Yeah. It's just not as homey of a feeling, not as family oriented. And so we really want that whole, white picket fence, big backyard, something like that.
Yeah. And it's not foreign to us to have to drive to get to places and, not have amenities right next to us, which is what the advantage is with apartments. You get that. With most apartments, you would get amenities very close to you. You can kind of just walk down and get to places very quickly. You can access public transport, things like that, which usually you wouldn't get with a house. But that's something that we're very used to and comfortable with, is just driving and walking, doing those things. It's not really foreign to us. But yeah, that's kind of our ultimate dream would be to build a house in a nicer area, and that's what we're working towards. But yeah, we're happy with where we are right now, living with in-laws.
I just thought about another benefit is, being able to spend time with your sister's family, and in particular, her kids, because I personally haven't been around kids much in my life. So it's kind of like a test run for us. Not that we're trying to be their parents or anything, but you get an idea of what parenting would be like and how we want to parent. And then, we can discuss our goals in terms of parenting and the kind of area we want to live in, the kind of parents we want to be, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's an opportunity that we probably wouldn't have gotten if we weren't living here and we didn't have as much interaction with your family.
Yeah, definitely. We wouldn't be seeing my sister's kids as often, and they definitely wouldn't be as close to you, especially because I was around for a long time. They were kind of raised in this house and they're familiar with me, but with you coming into the family, if you kind of only saw them once every now and then they wouldn't be as close to you. So living with in-laws, you definitely get a lot closer to the extended family as well.
Yep.
And that's an added benefit because it will make our lives easier when we do move out and have our own house. We'll be a lot closer with our families and we'll see them more often, and it'll be natural. It won't be awkward.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll avoid all of that awkwardness that sometimes can happen. But I think that's all we have for this episode. We've been living here for 6 months, and we've kind of just been expanding our home decor and making it more homey and just living, and it's comfortable.
Probably we could also talk about the language stuff.
Oh yeah. I guess the other thing that we can mention is also the language barrier, I guess if you could call it that. That's been something that you've been working on.
Yeah. Well, your family primarily speaks Urdu at home. I think if I wasn't here, it would just be mostly Urdu that's being spoken. unless it's you with your brother.
Yeah, like all my siblings to my parents, we speak in Urdu, but otherwise we speak in English if it's just amongst ourselves.
Yep.
But I guess for you to be able to communicate with my parents, they do speak English
Yeah, they
to
do.
an extent, but to really speak fluently and not have like miscommunications all the time, you've been working on your Urdu.
Yes, well, I've been taking lessons, which has been pretty good. I feel like I had a lot of progress in the beginning when it's all very new and like quite simple. But over time, it does get more difficult when you start learning the different verbs and just starts getting a bit confusing. And I also need to work on speaking it more
Yeah, well, that's a
because,
big thing.
yeah, that's like the whole point is to speak it. But yeah, that's one thing that I need to be working on.
Mm. I think that's something that my mum's really keen for as well. Is her English probably isn't the strongest, and she would love it if she could communicate with you in her native tongue, which is
Yeah,
obviously a lot
I'm
easier.
sure that would be a lot easier. Yeah.
Yeah, it's easier for her, not for you, and obviously it's easier for you to communicate in English. And
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's easier for you to learn a new language than it would be for her to learn a new language. Um, so it's kind of like a lot going on, but um, yeah, like trying to, I can empathize with that because I've never learned, like consciously learnt another language fluently and be able to speak it. Um, the two languages I do know is just the languages that I've kind of grown up and picked up from speaking. I've never really like learnt it from like a tutor or like from scratch.
Mm.
Um, so I guess I got away with that. But yeah, like I think the more you learn, the more you practice speaking. Like you can learn the grammar and like the technicalities of Urdu as much as you like. But when it comes to being able to speak fluently, I think you just kind of have to talk and like not be worried about embarrassing yourself and not be worried about like mispronouncing or, you know, not making sense, because usually people appreciate the effort you put in more than what you actually say.
Mm.
And being able to just even say a few words and have that make sense is like a huge step forward.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's something that you can, if you continue working on, and it's something that will get easier because you live in a household where you're constantly hearing it, and you pick up things over time.
Yeah. Well, that's my hope that just from hearing it, I will be able to understand it better. With speaking, that's a different story. Like I actually have to consciously speak it more.
Yeah, I think
But
even
yeah, I'm working towards that.
even being able to understand it is a huge step. Like if you can understand most of what's being said, and the thing with language, especially within a family, is like you'll hear the same sort of sentences and words over and over again,
Mm.
and it gets easier to pick it up. So yeah, if the more you understand, I think it will infinitely benefit your ability to speak as well. So
Yeah. And I think it will make me feel like less of an outsider if I don't have to have people translate for me. That would be great. Um,
yeah,
One day I'll
yeah.
just be able to, understand everything that's happening around me.
Well, my niece tries to translate or like
Yeah,
test you sometimes.
she does. Yes, she tries to teach me, which is great.
Mm. So yeah, that's all we have for you this episode.
Mhm.
In the next episode, we'll be exploring our first venture into Ramadan, which started not that long after we moved in, almost like a week or a bit over. Ramadan started, and that was like your first introduction to what it's all about and the funs and joy of fasting. Um,
Yep,
so yeah, that was your first Ramadan, and you got right into it like straight away. So
pretty much.
if you're keen to hear that story, wait out for episode 5. But that's all for this episode. Thank you guys for listening. If you are enjoying this series, we'd love it if you guys can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That will really help us grow. And of course, share it with your friends. And just so you know, we release new episodes every Tuesday. So yeah, we hope you guys are enjoying it and following us along on this journey. And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.